Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome, I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today is a California girl who bought a one-way ticket to India and landed in a Tibetan sewing workshop next door to the Dalai Lama and became one of few non-Tibetans to master the Buddhist art of silk appliqué thangka. Trained by two of the finest living Tibetan appliqué artists, she learned to stitch bits of silk into elaborate figurative mosaics that bring the transformative images of Buddhist meditation to life. Her art has been exhibited internationally and featured in magazines such as Spirituality and Health and Fiber Art Now, and in the documentary Creating Buddhas, The Making and Meaning of Fabric Thangkas. Today, she is a textile artist, teacher, and author of the forthcoming book, Threads of Awakening, an American woman's journey into Tibet's sacred textile art. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Leslie Rinchen-Wongmo.
Thank you so much, Julia. It's great to be here.
Leslie, our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, so what took you so long to write a book?
And it's a very good question. Actually, I lived in India for many years, for 9 years, and I studied this very rare art form with the Tibetans in exile there. And pretty much from the beginning of my time study, as soon as I knew that this was going to be my future life working in this art form, I knew I would probably write a book about it one day, because I was in a really unique position as a native mother tongue English speaker, having access to this tradition that no books have been written about. There's been a paragraph here and there in another book about Tibetan art, Tibetan painting and sculpture, but there's nothing been written about this very rare and ancient and sacred art form. So I knew that I was kind of perfectly placed to be the person to write about it. But for so many years, I really much preferred making the art to writing about it. And so it kind of got put on the back shelf. And there were many years also then that I thought, I need to go back to school and get a degree in art history to be able to write about this. I have to write something, scholarly. And I actually explored that for quite a while and decided ultimately not to take that path. And finally, I think it took 25 years, 20 years, I don't know, to realize that I actually had a tremendous resource in my own personal, direct, hands-on experience with the art form. And also that my story of how I ended up in that environment, learning that art, coming from such a different culture and landing there and learning it, that my story itself was of interest and could be inspiring for other people. So finally, it was like, okay, I'm writing from what I know. And it just took all those years to get there.
Well, I'm so intrigued by your story. I was the executive director of the Craftsmen's Guild of Mississippi, and I celebrated the art of 300 masters. So I'm just so intrigued by your story. So tell us more I know you get asked this question a lot, but tell us how you chose a one-way ticket to India as a destination and how you decided to take lessons there.
Well, first of all, I'm really excited to know that you were involved with the Craftsmen's Guild. I didn't know that we had that connection. So that's really exciting to know about that. Um, I actually studied urban planning and management and worked for a while in affordable housing development and thought that was going to be my career. But at the time when I finished grad school in the 1980s, it was typical to take a trip in the summer between finishing grad school and starting the job. And so most people went to Europe from California, where I was. That was what most of my classmates did. But I wanted to do something different. And I went on an organized trip. I thought it was the biggest adventure of my life at the time, but it was an organized trekking excursion in northern India, in Kashmir and Ladakh. And it was actually quite fortunate for me. It was the year before Kashmir closed for many years because of the strife, the warring that went on there. But when I went on that trip, which was supposed to be 3 weeks and my big adventure, and then I was going to come back and settle down into a normal life, I met people who were traveling for 6 months or a year. And I met people who had been in the Peace Corps and then stayed on. And I got inspired to do something more adventurous. And so I came back, I worked a couple of years, I saved my money, and I took off for what I thought was going to be 1 year of travel, primarily in Asia, because I was interested in Asian culture and Eastern spirituality. And I arranged to volunteer for a couple of months, I thought, for the Tibetans in exile in India. And as soon as the bus pulled into that town, Dharamsala, India, in the foothills of the Himalayas, I felt completely at home. Mm. I felt like I'd arrived home. And I ended up staying in my volunteer position for a year there. And while I was doing that, I discovered this art form and I just fell in love and I found a teacher and that was it. And that's the story that my book is about, is how that all came to pass and then the experiences that unfolded there.
Were you an artist before? Did you have artistic slants?
Slants. That's a good way to say it. Slants. I had always dabbled. I had painted when I was a child. I'd sketched in certain periods. I'd done a fair amount of quilting before I went, but never dived in fully the way I did with this art form.
Well, you've even taken a Tibetan name. Tell us how that came about.
Well, and that story is also in the book. But in Tibetan culture, names are recognized as somewhat fluid. They're not fixed for life necessarily. So often when a person has a major life change, they will ask a lama, a spiritual teacher, for a new name. Often, for example, monks, when they ordain, they get a new name. Or many of the Tibetans who came out of Tibet into exile asked the Dalai Lama for a new name. And when a lama gives a name, they give part of their own name. So the Dalai Lama's name is Tenzin Gyatso. And so many Tibetans who came out from Tibet into India and met the Dalai Lama have the name Tenzin in their name. So for me, I was studying at the Tibetan library, and my teacher there was named Geshe Sonam Rinchen. And when I went to him and I asked him, I said that I wanted to take refuge, which is a way of saying I want to follow the Buddhist teachings. And he gave me part of his name. So his name was Sonam Rinchen, and I became Rinchen-Wongmo. And that means precious initiate or precious empowered woman.
I love that. If I had taken a new name every time I started my life over, I would have a string of names by now. So
Well,
I
you
like
can do it,
that.
and I see your title of your own book is No Names to Be Given, right?
Yes,
So
yes,
names are very important for you.
they
Yeah.
they really are.
Yeah. So when I came back, just to complete that little story, is that then when I came back to the United States, I wanted to keep I wanted to retain the blessing of that name, and for a while I tried it on as just being Rinchen-Wongmo, but it didn't work for me because I'm also Leslie, and that's an important part of who I am as well. So I turned Rinchen-Wongmo into a surname. I hyphenated it, and it's been my professional and artistic name since then.
Very special.
Thank you.
Your foreword in the book is written by the Dalai Lama. I bet that doesn't happen very often.
I don't think it does, but I feel very lucky, very fortunate that he gave his seal of approval in that sense. Yes. Yes.
Once you knew you had to write this book, how did you proceed? Did you search for an agent, decide to choose a hybrid, a small press, or did you self-publish?
So you're saying after I wrote it, once I decided to publish it, huh?
Mhm.
And actually the decision was, I think this is probably common for a lot of authors. The decision of how to publish is bubbling up while you're writing it, And as I was writing, I was researching and learning about the publishing industry, which is in a constant state of reinvention. And I think certainly between the time I first imagined and knew that I would write a book, which is more than 20 years ago, and when I finished it, the industry changed completely. So when I first envisioned it, and even when I first started writing, I thought I would go to a traditional publisher. And I imagined that a publisher like Snow Lion, which doesn't exist anymore, it's been absorbed into Shambhala Publications, which is a major Buddhist publisher. I had imagined that because I'm writing something in a very specialized field, that they would be interested in it. But in the meantime, things changed. And if you don't have a very large platform, it's very hard to get a traditional publisher. Not impossible, but much more challenging. So I started looking into the other options. And I ended up with the hybrid publisher, which has turned out to be a really good option for me. I mean, I did spend I spent probably a year after I had pretty much completed the manuscript. I spent about a year looking for an agent or a publisher. I submitted my work to several. I had an agent for a short while, for a particular period of time. She shopped it around to a few places, but ultimately, I think what happened was perfect for me. I ended up with She Writes Press, which is a hybrid publisher, very well respected in the field. I think one of the first significant hybrid publishers, all women, run by women, and all women authors. And I think I've appreciated the partnership quality of it, that I have a lot of creative input and control, and yet I'm not alone as I would be in self-publishing. I need team members. I need somebody to bounce ideas off of, and to give me always a reality check, and to have experience, so that I don't have to learn everything from scratch. I tend to be someone who tries to learn everything, but sometimes I need to hand it off to other people who know better than I do. So I think it's been a really good option for me.
Well, She Writes Press is very well respected, and they do have a wonderful community that they build with all of their women authors. So that was a good choice.
Yes, the community is a really powerful aspect of She Writes Press. We really, because writing is a very solitary endeavor. And my artwork, stitching, is also a rather solitary endeavor. So I need to find ways to create community, because it's very important to have other people with you in the journey. Yeah.
Well, I know that photographing artwork is so tricky. Did you choose someone to capture your work, and are there photographs in the book?
There are photographs in the book, and I'm so excited. I was so happy to see the way that the color images came out. It's just, if anybody's looking, it's just really lovely, the work they've done. The photography was done by different people over the years, and by myself. So I have, it has been a challenge over the years to find, but I have a good collection of photographs, and was able to work with those. But actually, it was more of a challenge was cutting out, selecting the few pictures to actually include, and what would be best, not just to illustrate the art, but to illustrate the story and to show the handwork as best possible. Yeah.
Curation is very difficult for artists.
Yeah. It's a little like, yeah, curation is also like editing, right?
Yeah.
So it's difficult for an author to delete that perfect chapter or line that just is so beautiful but doesn't end up fitting. And it's difficult to curate one's own photographs and artwork too. So yeah, to distill what we need to communicate.
Like choosing your favorite child and leaving the rest out.
Well, hopefully we don't ever have to do that.
Leslie, tell us more about the book, and then read a section for us so we can hear your voice and tone in the book.
Well, what I'll say about the book, first of all, is that it doesn't fit neatly in any single genre, because it's part memoir. It's my story. And that memoir is actually more of a spiritual travel log. Yeah. And then it's also part art book. It's a documentation of this very rare and ancient textile art form. I'll say thangka is, you had said thangka, but it's thangka in Tibetan. That's okay. And I even have a chapter on how to pronounce it, like thangka truck. If you think of thangka trucks, you'll get it right.
I always butcher names, and
that one's impossible because it's not from our language. But most thangkas are paintings, and they're sacred Tibetan paintings to help guide meditation. But this form that I do is actually pieces of silk stitched together. And as I said, there haven't been any books about it. So this is really an homage and homage. That's another word we can butcher because it can be pronounced a million different ways, to this art form, and to kind of repay a debt of gratitude to my teachers and to the Tibetan culture for preserving this form, for keeping it alive, and then for giving me the incredible gift of receiving it as someone from outside of the culture. So I wanted to tell my story and the art story, and so it does both. And it's organized in pieces because these art forms are put together. These artworks are put together from pieces of fabric. So I put together pieces of my story. And so the chapters are very short. And I'm going to read one right from the middle, pretty much, called Piece 29, Step into the Tsemkang. And Tsemkang is the word for a sewing workshop. I squeezed into my place at the low table that filled one end of the large workshop. Just 15 inches off the floor, its surface was covered by a threadbare white tablecloth. Wool mats wrapped in blue cotton softened the floor on three sides. These meager cushions would make long hours of sitting on concrete tolerable. The space between walls and table was just wide enough for me to walk around on the mats and take my seat. Sunlight streamed in from the windows that dominated two of the walls from waist height to ceiling. The third wall was inset with shallow shelves. A boombox sat on one shelf, beneath a photo of the Dalai Lama. Another shelf was strewn with 10 or 12 cassette tapes in their boxes. A dozen apprentices sat cross-legged, sock-footed or barefoot around that vast table, each tending to a small piece of silk satin or brocade, individual contributions to a collaborative Buddha image. At 32, I was the oldest apprentice and the only Inji. Inji is the word for a person of European descent. So, my American-bred, share-spoiled legs could not remain crossed for long before numbness and tingling set in. To keep the blood flowing, I extended my legs and leaned back against the cool concrete wall as I stitched. As a rule, Tibetans refuse to step over books and bodies because pointing one's feet towards either is considered disrespectful. Words and people are respected as teachers. So when one of my fellow apprentices had to get up from the table, whether to retrieve materials, use the sewing machine, show Dorji Wangdu her progress, or visit the loo, her cross-legged Tibetan colleagues effortlessly cleared a path for her. They would lean forward just slightly over their neatly crossed legs, allowing her to pass behind them. But what to do with the sprawling foreigner whose legs spanned the path between wall and table? Sometimes I managed to quickly recross my legs and scoot forward to make space at my back. Other times I pulled my knees up and squished myself into the wall to make space for her to pass in front. I think the path was clear. Then, in a stunning act of propriety that made me cringe for my coarse Americanness, my colleague would reach down to lift a corner of my shawl where it was piled on the floor next to me and gently move it out of her way to avoid even disrespecting even my clothing with her foot. If they're this demonstrative in their respect for ordinary people, imagine the respect they show to Thangkas, whose images are believed to be manifestations of enlightenment, alive with the energy of the Buddhas they represent. Every piece of a Buddha to be deserved the highest esteem. Reverence permeated Dorji Wangdu's workshop, harmonizing with gossip and pop music.
That is so lovely. I can just see you sitting there with your legs outstretched as you stitched. That's lovely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is the stitching like quilting? It's on silk, so that's such a difficult fabric.
It is. It's not quite as difficult as you might think in that it's a very heavy silk. It's not a drapey, silk, what do you call it, chiffon or anything like that. It's a heavy satin and a heavy brocade. So that makes it a little more stable. Plus we stabilize the fabric. But it's very interesting technique. What we do is we wrap strands of horsehair with silk thread to create a kind of piping, a colored cord, and then couch, which is a form of stitching and making loops, the cord onto the surface of the fabric so that it creates this sort of three-dimensional effect, and it creates all the outlines of the drawing of the image. And then we cut out the pieces and turn the edges under and then put it together like a puzzle. And in that situation, it's kind of like a patchwork quilt. And all the little edges are overlapped and then we stitch it again. I always talk about how people tend to refer to it as Tibetan appliqué. That's the word that they've adopted, but it's not really appliqué because there's no ground cloth. There's no background. All the pieces are held together by their interconnections. They overlap. And I like to think of that as a metaphor for us in society, that we're all held together by our relationships and our interconnections. Yeah.
That's a lovely thought. Do you sell the book in India? And what out of the box ideas do you use for marketing this book?
The book will be available in India on Flipkart as well as Amazon's Indian site. I haven't really addressed ideas for marketing it specifically there. So that may be a next step. Thank you for like sparking that idea in my mind. I certainly will be sending a copy to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Not that that's marketing, but as in gratitude. But in terms of marketing here in the United States, well, there's a lot. And I think one of the things I would say to anybody that we have to keep in mind is you can't do everything. That just to pick a few things that you will enjoy and that you feel like you can wrap your mind around, and then let the other things be, at least for the time being. Maybe revisit it later. But what I have decided to do, and it's kind of crazy in this crazy time where everything is uncertain, and we're coming out of a pandemic, or we're still in a pandemic, but I am doing a cross-country road trip with my book, and speaking in various places to sewing groups, Buddhist groups, bookstore groups, and in friends' homes. And the reason I decided to do that is, in some way, it mirrors my taking off, buying a one-way ticket and traveling, which created the story of the book. But I thought I would enjoy traveling. I would enjoy meeting with people in small groups and conversing about my story. I really like connecting and conversing, as opposed to presenting. Do you know what I mean? And so I decided to put it out to my mailing list and say, hey, does anybody want to invite me to come? And I started there, and I let them guide me in a sense. I let the responses guide me. And so we'll see how it goes. I can't tell you anything about results yet because I'm just at the beginning.
I think that's great. And as a former marketing person, I can see all of those elements, craft centers and sewing groups. And I think those are wonderful, as well as the Buddhist groups. So I think you're on the right track there.
Thank you. If you have any ideas and want to invite me anywhere, please let me know.
Well, I would like you to go to some of the craft centers in the Southeast. That would be great.
All right. Yeah.
What about any other work? Leslie, are you continuing to do your artwork? Do you have another book in you?
I don't think I have another book in me, but never say never. It's been so much. This is, I don't conceive of myself as a writer. Not to say that not to in any way, it's not self-deprecating or anything. I needed to write this book. And I don't see myself as a writer in the sense of as a career. But I never say never. We'll see. I do continue to do my artwork, although much less in these last years, because I've really been focused on writing the book. I find that I'm a person who focuses on one major project at a time. And so this is my project right now. And then we'll see. And I also teach. I've been teaching through an online program. I've taught women all over the world, just a handful, but all over the world, this art form. And so it's called the Stitching Buddhas Virtual Apprentice Program. And that's something that's always available there on my website at threadsofawakening.com under teaching. Yeah, I feel very much a sense of wonder about what's next. This book is really the culmination of this long project, this long unexpected project. And I am really open to what will be next after that.
Well, your book is certainly a calling card for you now and can open so many doors. You've led such a fascinating life, and I think that this book is just going to propel you into other wonderful facets for your next journey, maybe your next name.
Who knows?
Well,
We
Leslie,
never know.
our last question of the interview is always our writers are over 50 are a unique group. Do you have any advice for writers 50 and above?
I think I would just say, you do things when you're ready to do them. And it really doesn't matter. The number doesn't matter. The age doesn't matter. It's when the time is right and when you're ready. Don't hesitate. Don't ever think it's too late because, I could think it's too late, not too late, but I can regret not having written the book 20 years ago. But it would have been a different book then. I've lived a lot of life and gained perspective in those years since then. And so it was time when it was time. And I think that's it. I think that's it, is just to respect where you are and know that what you have to say right now is just what needs to be said.
Thank you, Leslie. You have such a beautiful and kind and gentle spirit. And I think you have made our day today. And we just are so happy to now say that you're one of our authors over 50.
Thank you so much, Julia. You've made my day as well.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's D-A-I-L-Y, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.